Hello, and welcome to this Rain Taxi virtual event featuring André Gregory. I'm Eric Lorber, the director of Rain Taxi, and I'm delighted so many of you could join us tonight. If you don't know about Rain Taxi, we are a nonprofit organization that champions aesthetically adventurous literature. We do this in many ways, but our core has always been a quarterly magazine of critical writing, and we've recently published our 100th issue. So if you haven't seen it, we would love to mail you a copy. Hop on over to our website anytime after tonight's event, and you can order one there or become a member and get our forthcoming issues sent to your mailbox as well. Another way we serve the field of literature is through author events, and most of them, like this one, are free to attend. But if you're able to pitch in, feel free to use the donate button at the bottom of your screen. That's our donation jar in the virtual domain. We're privileged to receive funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Minnesota State Arts Board, among other funders, but our most vital supporters are individual people like you. There are other ways you can participate in tonight's event. Many of you are already chiming in on the chat, and we look forward to your further observations and joyful comments there. If you'd like to ask a question, put that in the Ask a Question box. I'll be collecting those during the event and bringing them back when I return toward the end of our presentation. And of course, you can use the Buy the Book button, and it'll take you right to a page for This Is Not My Memoir at our partner bookseller tonight, Majors & Quinn. In fact, while you're there, don't stop if there are other books you'd like to get, because any purchase you make tonight helps support our series. It's my pleasure, utter pleasure, to introduce our esteemed guest tonight, an artist I don't hesitate to name as having influenced my own offbeat path in the arts. Like many a young person decades ago, I walked out of a late night showing of a certain film filled with expansive new ideas about what theater is, what art can do, and what it means to be human. Already acclaimed as an avant-garde theater director, André Gregory in that film took on the formidable challenge of playing a version of himself, a character who could only be created by doing the deep work of looking within. My dinner with André's enduring vision of how inextricably art and life are connected is just one point in the unique tapestry of this artist's journey, a tapestry that famously went on to include the idea of rehearsing a play for years without the intention of performing it. And surely, if there were a Nobel Prize in friendship, and why isn't there one, it would go to Wallace Shawn and André Gregory, whose obvious affection and extraordinary artistic collaboration has inspired people around the world. All of this and more is unrolled for readers in This Is Not My Memoir, which I can confidently tell you is one of the best memoirs I've ever read. To speak with a person so devoted to theater, I invited one of the best and brightest from our energetic theater community here in the Twin Cities, Christina Baldwin. A veteran of the stage as a singer, actor, writer, and director, Christina has worked with theaters across the country, has adapted and directed operas, and has lent her voice to everything from animated films and public radio broadcasts to the Minnesota Orchestra. I'm so pleased she can be with us to guide our journey tonight with André Gregory. A hearty welcome to you both, and take it away, Christina.
What a beautiful introduction.
I know, my goodness.
Yeah.
Now we have to raise ourselves up to that, André. That's a lot of pressure.
I wish that before stepping out into the street every morning, Eric could be there to announce me to the world. That would be great.
Maybe we'll talk to him afterwards. Maybe we can make it happen. I'm sure we can. I thank you. Yes, I'm seconding André's thanks, Eric, for what an amazing preamble to this evening. And I wanted to say a big thanks to Rain Taxi for giving me the opportunity to talk to someone who is so highly esteemed in my field and has given me a lot of inspiration for possibility in theater, in work, and in life. So thank you, Rain Taxi, for this opportunity. And thank you, André, for joining us here this evening.
God, I wish I had you two around all the time.
We can also play, you know, trumpets or something. We can have some
Right.
fanfare as well, just to put it over the top. I so enjoyed reading your book. This is Not My Memoir, and I am also a big fan of poetry. And that was the thing as I read it, that there was so much imagery and story, and how the stories complement each other, but don't have to be so linear, you know, linked in a way that has to pair up in sometimes defying logic, but the feeling is there. And so I thank you for writing this book. And I just wanted to dive right in and ask about, there are a couple themes in it that always stuck out to me, but one is the importance of play in life, and the importance of play in theater. In my time in the theater, I've so enjoyed those moments where the work has a very big discipline, but there's a discipline of play too in how you create. And can you talk a little bit at all about how that was always a big priority for you? Was this something that came out of everything else, out of devising these works, or and making these works happen?
You know, I'm not sure. I hated school. I just hated it. And I was sort of unpopular. And I was terrible at sports. I always thought, you know, people throwing hard objects in your direction was a horrible thing. So I wasn't good at play of any kind. So I suppose in my work, I just loved the idea of play. I didn't think of it as being play, but I love what I do. I've always loved what I do, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm an enthusiast. And I once learned that the root meaning of enthusiasm is the God within, from the Greek entheos. And I'm not just an enthusiast, I'm an amateur. So I'd never painted before, and I love to paint. I'd never written a book before, and I loved writing the book. So I guess just I'm playful. I like to play with people.
Yeah, that's great. And but I'm always so struck by the play that you have, which has a great rigor to it, the rigor of time, and how you talk about in the book about how that time and discipline can equal miracles, and that kind of miraculous nature in what you do. Did you was that something when you first started out, and when you were on this journey, was this something that came as you were working with people in a room? Was this something that you came into it with your already formed, or was this something in being in rooms with people and realizing that the time that was needed for work?
You mean as to how much time I take?
Well, time and play. It's like I feel like there's this this great discipline of both that keeps refreshing itself. And I think it goes to what you're talking about, the enthusiasm, but that takes a lot of energy to sustain that,
It does. It does.
hope.
Yeah.
For that day after day.
Yeah, you know, I rehearsed, I talk about it in the book. I rehearsed one play for 14 years.
Right.
Not every day, but, you know, for a lot of time, probably came to about 2 years in all. And of course, we think that we have to rehearse a play for 6 weeks or 4 weeks because that's all the time we have money for. But a novelist God knows how long Proust took to write Remembrance of Things Past. And, you know, if you're an artist, you just want to work until it's right. You don't have a specific goal. You don't know what you're after at first. You leap into the unknown and you just go as long as you need to go until it's finished, until you've got nothing more to say, until you've somehow said it all.
Yeah. Did
And,
you when oh, please.
Go ahead.
No, just when you're working on that, is that something that you talk about as like the rules of engagement with the people in the room? Is that something that is something that just because you have these longtime collaborators that understand that kind of work, but when someone new comes into the work you're doing, is there a way that you talk about the expectations?
No, I never talk about anything. even though you probably know from my dinner with Andre, I'm somebody who by nature just can't keep his mouth shut. But when I'm actually rehearsing, I say almost nothing because language, I think, is too imprecise for something as subtle as the creative process. When Louis Malle and I were working on shooting the film of Vanya on 42nd Street, because he didn't like to talk either. He loved our set designer who worked with me for 30 years because he never said anything. And we'd do a take and Louis would look over at me and I would go like that or like this or like that. And he would nod and do another take. And we never talked about what Vanya was about, what we were trying to do. We were both people who just went with instinct, with our own intuition.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful, and you see the trust that's there when you have that time to work with people and to have that understanding. It really it's apparent, it's authentic, and it's beautiful.
And the other word, of course, that's very important, that's central to This Is Not My Memoir, is the word love. If you love the process, if you love the people you're working with, if you love the work you're working on, if it isn't a job, if it's love, passionate love, you might get somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you have to ask like with all love, there's those hard questions that have to be asked within it too. So you have to have that passion to keep it moving forward.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about working with Louis Malle, and the thing that I'm so interested in hearing from you too is in this time in live theater where we're not able to do what we do. There's a lot of discussion about what is theater and how it should be done and how does it work with virtual means. And what I think is so striking is that you were on the forefront of creating this hybrid form of sorts that still is theater, it still is using film, and you are making the work happen, but it's in the time that it takes in the process that has created what it is that is captured. What is your thought right now on how theater can learn from these other art forms, from film, from these other methods of telling our stories?
I'm not sure it can learn anything. I think if you're doing theater, it's like, well, you're married, I'm married. Every marriage is completely different. The only thing it has in common is most likely you'll be in a room together and hopefully enjoy it. But there are no rules. There are no rules for what makes a good marriage. Just as I don't think there are really rules for what makes good theater. And something that's so fascinating to me about this awful epidemic, about this plague that we're caught in, is I don't think we know what the world is going to be like, not just theater, the world, when this is over. None of us have been in prison for a year before, or mostly we haven't. Um, None of us have experienced something this bizarre, and I don't think we can imagine what the world will be like afterwards, let alone the theater.
Yes.
In fact, my friend Eugene Lee, who's been my designer, I think, for 40 years, he designed Saturday Night Live and The Wiz and things like that. He doesn't think there's going to be a Broadway theater for at least 15 years, if ever, when this is over. So God only knows what the theater will be.
Yeah.
And
I think
an interesting thing about theater is in the 30s, in the 1920s and 30s, and in the 1960s, the theater was amazingly creative, unique, original, but nobody knows why. And then one day it just ended and became dull, commercial. We don't know why.
Yeah.
We don't know why things begin, and we don't know why things end.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, though. I mean, I wonder if there's anything to be, put it over a timeline of what's happening in the world at that moment and the politics at play. But one would think there'd be a lot more times of great creativity, because there sure has been a lot of stuff happening in our world that timeline would inspire someone to try something. So I don't know, but
One can only hope.
right. Here's hoping.
But reality is so much larger and extraordinary than theater is. Who could invent the horror of Trump for the theater? I mean, Shakespeare came pretty close, because he created some quite extraordinary villains. But we are still, there, as you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of books written about the Nazi period. And in spite of all those books, we still don't understand how, in the most civilized country in the world, in the country that produced Thomas Mann, Bertolt Brecht, Bach, Beethoven, how could they have produced Hitler? And I think while you're living through history, which we are now, there's no way to totally understand how anything as awful as Trump could have happened. And nobody could quite imagine how close democracy could have come to ending. I'm not sure theater can recreate that.
True. Yeah, it can try to give some options of ideas of why and how, but there is something wild about what we've gone through, what we've seen, that defies imagination at times.
As you know, in the book, I talk about how my Jewish family got out of Nazi Europe, and how our sister ship had been torpedoed, and how about my little brother and I were fitted for gas masks because they thought the invasion of England was about to begin. And I've never got over it. I'm a survivor. And I remember the day Trump took office, I went to a little hotel around the block, and there was this lovely little boy. I think he was about 4 years old, and he had a hoodie. He kept playing with his hoodie, and I started playing with him, and he suddenly put his hood down and he said, "My daddy says Trump won't kill me. Is that true?" And I was suddenly carried back to being the little boy on a train going from France to Switzerland in 1938 with my mother, when the Gestapo came in to look at passports and she went white as a sheet. Why am I talking about this? I can't remember.
No, well, because I think we're in a time, I think this is it. We're trying to learn from our history, like, as you said, living in our history and what is to come. And the best we can do is to look back at how traumas have shaped artists and people and how it goes. I look at my own, frankly, I look at my own children and what they're just living through in their reality of this. It's not having their sister ship torpedoed as they come, immigrate to America, but this year of pandemic and how that has changed their view of the world and what that will affect in what they do and what they want to make.
I can't even imagine. Yeah, I can't.
It's a big change, and I think that goes back to what you're saying about it's hard to know what theater will be when it's hard to know how we, as a society, will be changed.
Right, but of course there are always exceptions. Have you read Wally Shawn's plays?
Yes. Yeah.
Because in The Designated Mourner, which we've just done as a podcast, that and Grasses of a Thousand Colors. Well, The Designated Mourner, of course, is predicting fascism in America. And the play was written in 1997, I think. Grasses of a Thousand Colors is talking about what the world would be like and what love would be like in the middle of a plague. Wally does see the shape of things to come. I think not so much because he's a visionary or a prophet, whatever that is.
Right.
But he has an amazing, astounding ability to look at reality now, to look at the world unsentimentally. And from looking at what he sees, he can imagine what is coming. So it's true, contrary to what I was saying, that if you listen to Wally's plays 15 years ago or something, you would have known what was coming down the pike. And it would have been terrifying.
Right. But and then this is the other question too of the role of art and how we can, what it is we can do to help. And the hard part is when you read that so many years ago and you think that could never be.
Right.
That couldn't be. And yet here we are. So,
well, didn't Sinclair Lewis write a book?
The Machine Stops.
Oh, I don't
right?
know that one. I was thinking.
No, I'm thinking of Ian Forster.
I was thinking of it Can't Happen Here.
Yes.
I think that was the title. And then, of course, there was Orwell with 1984, who totally saw the world as we're living it now.
Yeah. And it's true. It's in the hands of sci-fi writers, and it's in people who can imagine the next step, but that next step is about 20 more paces down the path.
But then you never know, as an artist, how you're going to affect people. When we did My Dinner with Andre, we got a letter from a guy who said, I've been a Marine for most of my life. When I saw your movie, I decided to leave the Marines and play the cello. And I thought, what a great thing. And there was a woman when we did Vanya who wrote us and said, I saw Vanya and it's helped me die.
Oh.
So you have no idea. That's why I don't think you can say what is the purpose of art. You can just do it with as much honesty and beauty as you can, and then hope that there's going to be just one person out there whose life will be changed by what you do.
I think that's true. I mean, I think it's hard to go into those worlds of knowing, just because there's no monolithic experience for any one person. Then each person's experience in interacting with a story is going to be very different, and what it gives them.
Well, I had a great teacher at Harvard who taught Anglo-Saxon poetry. And the first day of class, he said, probably some of you are in here because you hope to get a great grade. Don't worry about that. I give everyone an A. I don't like people who are in here for that reason. If that's your reason, get the hell out of here and I'll give you an A. And then the second thing he said that was wonderful, he said, you know, if you don't love a book after 50 pages, stop reading it. He said, books are like people. They may be wonderful, but they're just not for you.
That could have saved me a lot of heartache, Andre.
Yeah,
Why didn't we have this conversation earlier?
I'll bet.
But I think that's an interesting thing too, that there are in your book too, you talk about teachers and mentors and people who have really shaped your life. And I think that's a lost art in the way that the American system is arranged at the moment. And just education versus mentorship is that alone, I think, is a lost art of how one finds mentors and how one journeys with them, because then the lessons learned go back and forth.
But if you search, you'll find a teacher. If you really want a teacher and you really need a teacher and you really reach out for the teacher, I think you'll find the teacher.
Yeah. Have the teachers you found been the teacher you were looking for, or did you even, I guess I'm asking, did you already have an idea of what you needed, or did the teacher come to you out of just a need?
Yeah, I never know what I need. I never know what I'm looking for. I begin a play and I have no idea what it's about or how to do it. I'm sort of like Alice in Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
If a white rabbit runs by and jumps down a rabbit hole, I'll leap in after it. If I sniff something that could lead me into the unknown and somewhere I need to go, I'll just jump.
That's amazing. I mean, it's very much in that. Well, I'm framing it in this whole time of pandemic and the stoicism of the obstacle is the way. But I like yours is much more hopeful because it's an interesting white rabbit and it's an interesting smell. It's not going for the obstacle, but it's going where your interest is taking you and where your curiosity is taking you.
Well, that's something I think that's very interesting about lockdown, is that it strips us of everything habitual. You know, I love to go to restaurants. I love to go to the theater. I like to be with people. All of that's been stripped away. And if you strip away the habitual, you have the opportunity of seeing yourself in a new light. What is it you really want? What is it you really need to do? You know, I go out and have dinner with people that I now think, oh, I didn't need to have dinner with them. It was a waste of time. They're nice, but I didn't absolutely need to do that. Oh, I went to see that play. Yeah, that was okay, but I could live without it. What is it that we can't live without? And I think lockdown is facing us with that question.
That's enormously true, I think. And I think it's also, I'm just not to always relate it back to the rehearsal room, but I think it's really true of work, in trying to make things too. It's oftentimes I know in my even my music training, it felt oftentimes it was a stripping away where the best things came out of it, rather than trying to put something onto it or force something to happen. And definitely in lockdown, I think there's been a lot of introspection and time to, well, we've been forced to have to address some issues, and there's been a lot of great language that's come out of it. I feel like our vocabulary as humans is starting to expand, which is a good thing, I guess, out of the
But it'll be nice if it ends.
Yes. Introspection is fine, just for in bits, Andre, in bits. Yeah. I want to go back to, you have some podcasts too that you mentioned of yours and Wallace Shawn's work together. Is that right? That you're having these that are coming out, and I just love that there's a great expansiveness to how you pursue opportunity and interest and art and where it lives, and there's not a definition of what where it has to dwell for you. So is this your first time working in podcasts?
Yes,
producing them.
I'm having a mid-career breakthrough.
May we all be so lucky.
Yeah, I haven't done it before. I don't think I'll do it again.
Yeah.
But it's been wonderful to do. And the two podcasts of his plays are exquisite. Just exquisite. Wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, I will be checking those out. And
of course,
you also
Wally and I now, I think, have been working together for 50 years. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. Yeah. That's an amazing artistic marriage.
And we've only had one fight that lasted for 12 minutes.
Oh my goodness. That's astounding to me.
Yeah,
did you have
what?
Did you I'm like, did you click right away?
Right away.
Right away.
It was love at first sight. Yeah, he's like well, he's like a brother. He's my dearest friend. He's like a brother. And you know, we've made, I think, half a dozen wonderful works together.
Yes.
He was a gift from the gods.
And it's lovely. It's lovely when you find those partnerships. Again, it's like, I think that's also, it's like, it's an artistic partnership, but there's also how you grow together. That is not always a given, because the rate at which one person's interest takes them at a different speed or a different direction can make it fall apart. So I think it's that's to be commended that you found that great partnership.
Well, I feel it's a blessing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and talking about blessings, I love also in your book how there's this sense of just the spiritual of all of this and all of these pursuits, and the miracles of finding these connections with people and the conversations that can come out of it, and the work that comes out of it. Yes, that's good, but there's something, it's almost like the work is the symptom of the thing that's happening with the people in that room. And
yeah, well, of course, in the book, you see me, or I write about going to as one example, one of the wildest places in the world, Ladakh, which is at the top of the world. It's 10,000 feet high. It used to be Western Tibet, and of meeting a Tibetan Lama who opened my eyes to the miraculous. He showed me that the world, in fact, the real world, Saint-Exupéry says it in The Little Prince. He says the wonderful thing about the desert is that it hides a well. And what this Tibetan Lama showed me, and then Guru Mai on her ashram afterwards, is that what we think is real is only the surface, and that reality is a place of miracles just under the surface. You know, it's like the man who became St. Paul was a businessman, as I remember it, and he was on the road to Damascus, I guess, to make a deal. He not only never heard of Christ, Christ had died 200 years before, and he met Christ on the road to Damascus. Christ appeared to him, and it not only changed him, but through him it changed Western Christianity. How do we explain that? God only knows. I don't know how I'm sitting here in front of this glass and talking to a very charming person that I've never met before. I don't know how it works, but it's a miracle. It is a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle, I think, that they found a vaccine in 1 year. And the amazing thing about that, you know, it's like when the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, and America had no Navy, no Air Force, no Army, but they put the nation to the yoke, and within half a year or something, created one of the largest armies and one of the most powerful navies and Air Force in the world, because they could. And I think if we would put the same effort and endeavor that, thank God, we've put into the vaccine, into solving world poverty, and most especially solving the environmental crisis, we could do it. We just have to do it.
Yep.
Everything is possible.
I think that is brilliant and true, and everything is possible. And putting our passions and our interest into it is key. And I think that's a perfect place to maybe I could pepper you with questions for a lot longer, but I know that we also have some people in the chat who are wanting to ask you some questions. So
well, I'll come to Minneapolis. I'll go back to drinking coffee, which I went off for COVID, and you could ask all your questions.
Oh, good. I make a very good cup of coffee, Andre. I do.
Great. You're on. It's a date.
Wonderful. So I think, Eric, we have some questions that have there been some questions that have come in that we want to ask of Andre?
Yes. First, let me thank you both for this charming conversation. It's just a delight to eavesdrop on, and all our minds are wrapped and spinning with interesting thoughts. But yes, we have some terrific questions out here from people.
Before the questions, you know, I was sitting here and I have my book beside me, and it occurred to me that whoever said you can't tell a book by its cover is full of it. This is a wonderful book because it's got a wonderful cover. So read it.
It does. I have to say, mine is flagged and has all these little things, but I enjoy, and you are the artist and
yes, I did the cover.
Yes, I think that's
didn't
beautiful.
do the cover, but I did that self-portrait.
Yeah.
And that's actually our very first question tonight too. People want to hear a little bit more about your life as a painter now, and maybe especially what you're learning from painting that might be different than what theater gives you.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, one of the main things that painting has given me is that most plays are quite dark, quite sad. And when I was in Poland once, I was introduced to a young man who didn't know me. He shook my hand and he said, "When I look into your eyes, I see the saddest optimist I've ever met. So there is a side to me that is extremely positive and extremely optimistic, which is sometimes hard to find in plays. But in painting, my joy came out. The little child who originally came into this world filled with joy was born again. And then also, painting has been wonderful for me because if you're a theater director, as you know, Christina, you have to find money, you have to find people, you have to find a rehearsal space. Painting, you just have to go into a room with a paintbrush and some paints, costs nothing, and just do it. But I got into it in a wonderful way because Cindy and I went to Cape Cod, which she loved. I'd never been up there. And I just fell so in love with the Cape, with this light that was changing all the time, that I would look at the light on the side of a building and burst into tears at the beauty of it. And I loved it so much, I was terrified that I was going to retire, which for me would be awful, that I'd just stay there and never go back, And so Cindy, who has an uncanny wisdom, she said, well, there are many painters on the Cape. You should take a workshop in painting. So I signed up for a workshop. I was terrified because if you already do something very well, and I was a very good theater director, the thought of beginning at zero and do something you have no idea how to do was terrifying. So I went to the first class in a state of absolute terror, and there was a live model. And at the end of the class, she was walking around the room naked, saying to herself, where the hell did I put my panties? Where are my panties? And I was suddenly convinced, oh my God, I must have cleaned my brushes with her panties.
Oh, no.
And I was filled with horror. And then when I found out that in fact it was the woman next to me, the painter next to me, who had done that, it wasn't me, I was innocent. I thought, oh my God, this could be fun. Maybe I should keep at it. And I've never stopped.
Thank God.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope it did.
I suspect they're more than satisfied. Another viewer out there is interested in the title, and indeed, I think we all catch that cheeky reference to "This Is Not a Pipe." But tell us more as to why you titled your memoir "This Is Not My Memoir."
Well, I always thought that a memoir was a place of last resort. When you were too old to do anything else, you wrote about your life. And I swore that one thing I would never do was write a memoir. So in a way, the title is kind of tongue-in-cheek. I wouldn't write a memoir. This is not my memoir. But also, in the memoirs I've read, often people have an axe to grind, a terrible father, an awful marriage, a drug problem. And because I love novels, I think I was writing something that wasn't so much a memoir as a story of a very strange, idiosyncratic guy who begins his life hostile, aggressive. Is there a phrase, a loose piano? A loose cannon.
Loose cannon. I want to see a loose piano, though.
Yeah, I was a loose piano. And over time, becomes a much gentler, warmer, loving, compassionate person. Because the book is about love. It's not so much about my life, although pieces of my life are definitely in there, and many, I think, wonderful stories, but it's a love story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That leads us right to another interesting question. Someone asks, and I find this fascinating given how often aspects of your life have migrated into your art. Could this book give rise to a piece of theater?
Oh, what a great idea. I'd never thought of that. Yeah, it would be. It could be, I think, probably a very entertaining one-man show, which I may do. And if I do it, thanks to you, whoever you are.
Oh, that's wonderful. On the subject of possibly acting this out, someone asks that, given how you've talked about actors needing different things at different times, um, is that sensitivity to individual need something that you feel can be taught, or is it something that you feel is more innate to a
Oh, I
director?
think it absolutely cannot be taught.
Okay.
I think it depends on empathy. You have to be able to empathize with another human being. And you have to be able to some degree see the other human being with clarity and see what they need, see what they want. An actor often will suddenly take some kind of odd step, and you think, oh, that's the direction he wants to go in, or she. Let me help them. Let me see if I can support them to go further in the direction that they want to go. That can't be taught. I think that's why what I would call a director, I think I've only met 5 in my entire life.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. As you described that, it occurred to me that those are fitting comments for dealing with each other in life as well.
Damn right. Damn right.
Well, and the both of you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think maybe it's worth coming around to. I know we all are struggling with this new reality and the splintering of reality and the restrictions on how we can fix it. Not being able to be together is a cruelty, I think,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
hard. So someone is asking, do you think theater can help repair this? Are there things theater can do when we can be together to create it?
Well, I hope so. Who knows? I hope I live long enough to see if that happens.
Well, I do too. I think all of your viewers and fans and the people you've touched throughout life look forward to you being with us as we repair this reality. I feel more hopeful now than I did an hour ago that it's possible. So I want to thank you for bringing that energy and optimism into this conversation.
And you both made me feel great. So I thank you.
Good.
Yes, and you look great, which I mean sincerely and not in the way you referred to it in the book.
That's nice to hear. Thank you.
Thank you both, and to all our viewers out there, thank you for being with us. Be good to yourselves and to each other. Take care. Good night.
Good night.